This is tutorial number 5, and this will go over the dimension toolbar, the esnap toolbar, as well as polar to try and refresh your memory on some of those things. So you've seen me use a lot of what's going on up here in the dimension toolbar. I've used align for lines that were at an angle. I've used linear a lot for straight lines, kind of like this line right here, to give you dimensions. And then we've got things like this, like baseline. Okay, so maybe this is my baseline right here. Let me go ahead and get rid of this. Maybe this is my baseline dimension right here. I need to do one. You need to start out with a linear dimension first. So I do one right there, click there, and then I can click on baseline, and every other dimension will be off of that same line. So I can click there, I can click there, I can click there, and I can click there. And of course you can see I've got some issues with these numbers overlapping, so I can then grab the grips and move them out of ways, and make sure that you can actually read what these dimensions say. And then you hit escape, and I may need to move these out even a little bit further, and so on. But you get the idea of how you can manipulate and move these things around. And move this guy in a little bit, and let's see. I can take this number and move that number up. So it might be something like that. So that kind of gets you an idea. And actually, I have these two guys are flipped. So it would look something like that, and that is the baseline dimension. There's also another one called continuous. So here we go with one linear dimension. I'm going to take this guy and try and put him in the middle right there. And then I'm going to click on continue, and they're going to continue off of each other. And so every single one of those is continued off of each other. And so every one of those dimensions would work to give you the height of each of these sections of that object. Okay? If we had a circle right here, since I've gone over baseline, I've gone over continuous, I'm not too sure about ordinate. We might go over that in the dimension lessons later on. But here are center marks. A lot of you guys have been used to drawing your own center marks. You can actually click on this and click right here, and as you can see, it gives you a center mark in the middle. What if you wanted to change that to lines? You certainly could. Here's how you do it. D, enter. And you would need to go to radial diameter dimension, and there's center mark display right there. And currently it's on mark, and that's why you see a little mark right there in the center of the circle. If I change that to as centerline, you can see it changed that to centerlines. Click OK, and now when I do it, it should show up as a center line. And there you have it. Okay, so you can definitely change it to a center line. And of course, we would be working on one that has layers, which we're going to talk about in a little bit, and that would show up as actually long dash, short dash, long dash, short dash for center line. But since we don't have any layers and we don't have any center lines, it's just going to show up as solid lines currently. And then we've discussed diameter. You can just click on that. We've discussed radius. You can click on that. And we discussed angular, I believe. Hopefully this will be at 90 degrees. I click on angular, click here, and that's 90 degrees. Those are pretty basic. You can do arc length. Don't do too much of that. You can do jog. We're going to talk about liters in one of the lessons that we do, so I'm going to save that one for a bit. Tolerances we're not going to get into too much. You can edit dimensions if you need to. Generally, I don't get into this too much because you really shouldn't have to edit dimensions unless there's a necessary reason. But some of the lessons and books do get into this if need be. And so I'm just trying to give you stuff that you're going to use throughout. And here's dimension style. That's the same thing as hitting D, enter. Currently, we only have standard. I'm actually going to have you do lesson 16 again to make the class style dimension. And we'll go over all those specifics when we get there. So that's the dimension toolbar. The other toolbar I wanted to go over was esnap, which is this one with all the red dots right here. This one has all the different entity snaps that you might need, like snap to visual intersection, snap to intersection, snap to endpoint, snap to extension, and so on. They're the same options that you have here if you right-click on esnap and go to settings. Remember, we've checked these boxes on and off in the past, and you can certainly use them as need be. So just be familiar with each of those. I believe there's one that you guys are going to recall where you had to draw this eyelash of the kind of the eye of the storm, and I'm supposed to snap every line to perpendicular. And so that one says perpendicular, but if I had perpendicular turned off over here, because currently it's on, and now I had to do snap to perpendicular, no matter what I do, I can't get perpendicular to come on. So I hit snap to perpendicular up here, and now here it is right there, boom, enter, enter again to draw another line, and then snap to perpendicular, and there it is right there, and click. And so that is utilizing the eSnap toolbar. And again, if you're going to use something a lot of times, I would recommend going to eSnap and going to settings and checking the box. If you're going to use it a handful of times, then just utilize the toolbar that's up here. Okay. After that, we're going to get into Polar. On Polar, one thing I want you to know how to do on Polar is change the settings. So I simply right-clicked on Polar, went to settings. Mine is currently on 30 degrees, and I'm going to show you how that works right now. So what that means is if I start a line here, it's going to snap every 30 degrees. So there's 30 degrees, there's 60 degrees, 90 degrees, 120, 150, 180, 210, 240, 270, 300, 330, and 360 or back to 0. Remember, it goes in a counterclockwise rotation, so depending on what you're doing. So if I start a line there, click enter, hit enter again, start a line here, and now I want it to go 30 degrees. Boom, there it is at 30 degrees right there. Okay, if you're not sure, use angular and make sure that that is 30 degrees. You can also change these settings to a lot of different ones, and then I can show you how to do specific ones here in just a minute. Okay, so the other way that you do utilize Polar is by starting a line, and you want to right click down here. Currently it's on absolute, but you're going to go ahead and start your line, and then you're going to right click and you're going to go to relative. And once relative is on, it changes it from the X and the Y numbers right here to a number and an angle. Okay, and how this works is if I want to do another line that's 30 degrees, actually maybe what I should do first is draw just a straight line like that. Okay, and then I'm going to draw a line down here, and I'm going to start my line, and it's currently on relative, and you can see it because it's grayed out. So here we go. Here's my line, and you can tell it's on relative when you get a number and an angle symbol. And so what I'm going to do a specific angle is you go shift and the number 2 to do at, and I'm going to do, say, 3 inches long, and then I'm going to put in the angle sign, 30 degrees. So this line is going to be at 3 inches long at 30 degrees, and I hit enter, and that line should be 3 inches long at 30 degrees. So let's double check that. So we look at the angle, that's 30 degrees, and we go to aligned, and this should be 3 inches long. And it is. Okay, so that can be a little bit confusing. What you have to remember is the polar clock. Remember, it does start over here at 0, and it goes all the way around. It goes all the way around 0, 90, 180, 270, all the way back to 0 or 360. So I'm going to do one more line because that can be a little bit confusing. So I'm going to start with just a straight line here. Then I'm going to click on line. I'm going to start my line, and I need to make sure I'm on relative. And again, I am because I just finished that. And so once you're on relative, and again you're on relative because you get a number and an angle sign, I'm going to go shift in the number 2, which is at, and then I put in my distance. So I'm going to make a line that's 5 inches, and then I put in my angle symbol at, say, 270 degrees, and hit enter. And so what should happen now is that if you remember, this would be 90 over here would be 180, or sorry, this would be 90 right here. This would be 180 right here. This would be 270 right there, and this line should be 5 inches. So that can be a little bit confusing, but that is the way that you put in specific angles. You need to use relative, and you need to get comfortable with doing that. That can be one of the things that trips people up, especially when they're using Polar and they can't find specific angles in here. Okay, for whatever reason, a lot of times these adding specific angles in here doesn't really seem to help. So that's the way that you need to do it, is use relative and then use the keyboard to do it. And then when you're doing other things, you may want to come back here and turn absolute back on, so now you have your X and your Y. So anytime I'm putting a specific angle in and a specific distance, I'm using relative. Anytime I need the X and the Y, I'm using absolute. So one more. I'll do I'll make a line that's 3 inches long at 60 degrees and hit enter. And that line right there should be 3 inches long and it should be 60 degrees. And I show this one a number of times because a lot of people get confused how to do this one. And so it is 60 degrees, and let's double check and make sure it's 3 inches, and it is, and we're good to go. So that is polar for you, and that should help you to pretty much do anything that you want to do. So again, right click on polar, go to any settings, change these angles. If it's there, great. If it's not, then make sure you understand how to use absolute down here as far as the coordinates go. Okay. One last thing I want you to be aware of is E-track, and E-track can help you to draw lines that are like the same distance. For example, if I draw a line over here and then I draw a line up here, and I just hold my mouse there, as long as I come up here, and you see that line right there tracking, it's going to make my line the exact same distance. Okay, and it's not that big of a deal if you don't want to use it. I mean, I could always go past it and then draw a line from there to there, and of course trim it off if I wanted to. But it does make things easier at times, so you don't have to go through those steps. So feel free to use E-track as well, and I'll see you in the next tutorial where we go over text.